What in the world is going on at Yosemite National Park? In this episode, I'm going to read an email from a park ranger who goes into great details about what is happening. But before I get to that, I wanted to let you all know that I have a podcast that I'm co-hosting with Josh at What Lurks Beneath. Check out our latest episode. I'll put the link in the description and the pinned comment. You can also search for the Dread Lurks podcast on YouTube. Hey Donovan, I hope you're doing well. I've been a park ranger here for over 10 years, and I never thought I'd have to write something like this. But after a year full of strange events that I can't ignore, I feel I have to share what's been going on at the park. I trust that you'll keep my name out of it and share this on your YouTube channel if you find it useful. It all started about 13 months ago. One August night, while I was out on a routine patrol near Tunnel View, I saw a strange pulsing glow on the horizon. At first, I thought it might be a forest fire or something natural, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't normal at all. The light wasn't steady. It changed colors and intensity, almost as if it were alive. I pulled over, got out, and watched for several minutes. I noted down the details in my personal log before the light eventually faded away. I wasn't sure what to make of it at the time, but I didn't think much more about it until more odd things started happening. A few weeks later, I was posted near Glacier Point when a coworker told me about some strange voices he'd heard echoing in the canyon at night. He said they sounded like soft murmurs, almost like someone was talking quietly from a distance, but there was something off about them, like the words were not entirely in English. I tried to remember if I'd ever heard anything similar, but I couldn't. Then, over several nights, I too began to pick up what I can only describe as faint, almost indistinguishable whispers. They weren't loud enough to have a conversation, just soft sounds in the background, like someone was quietly talking somewhere just out of reach. Another incident happened about 2 months later when I was patrolling along the Merced River near Yosemite Valley. I was alone on a rarely used maintenance trail when I noticed a figure off in the distance. At first, I thought it might be a hiker, but the way it moved was odd, more like it was gliding than walking. Before I could get a good look, the figure disappeared behind a stand of pines. I rushed over, heart racing, but found nothing there, only a fleeting shadow in my peripheral vision. I'm still not sure if what I saw was a person, a trick of the light, or something else. Things continued to get stranger. One day, while I was near the base of Sentinel Dome doing maintenance on a service road, I saw several small lights hovering above the dome. They weren't like any stars or airplanes I'd seen before. The lights moved slowly and seemed to be scanning the area. At one point, one of the lights split into several smaller orbs that danced around before merging back into a single beam. I couldn't shake the feeling that these lights weren't random. They felt deliberate, almost like they were watching me, and I left that area feeling more than a little uneasy. I've also heard some unsettling stories from other rangers. One retired colleague, who spent many years working near Mariposa Grove, told me about a creature he called the Gugwe. He described it as part Bigfoot and part something much darker, a large, shadowy figure with a glimmer in its eyes. At first, I brushed off his story as something from too many long nights alone in the wild, but then I had my own experience. While checking a remote trail near Wawona, I suddenly felt like I was being watched. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a large silhouette moving slowly among the trees. It was unlike any animal I'd ever seen, and its presence made my skin crawl. I couldn't tell if it was an animal or something else entirely, but it left me with a strong sense of dread. There are other stories too. Several rangers have mentioned seeing a ghost-like figure near Brittlevale Fall on misty mornings. Some describe it as looking mostly human, while others say it has strangely long limbs and unusual eyes. I haven't seen it myself, but I've come across sketches and written accounts in notebooks left behind by rangers who later got transferred or quietly removed from duty after unexplained absences. One account that stands out is from a ranger who was on his break near the base of the fall. He said he kept hearing footsteps on the wet rocks following him, but every time he turned around, there was no one there. It was like something was playing a trick on him. On a foggy November morning near Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, I encountered another odd event. I was on a scheduled patrol when I noticed that an old decommissioned ranger station nearby suddenly started showing electrical disturbances. The power lines, which had been silent for years, began to emit a low, crackling static, and the ground under my feet seemed to vibrate slightly. I later found out that similar disturbances had been reported in several other parts of the park around the same time. At first, I thought it might have been a technical glitch, but the readings didn't match any normal patterns. It felt like something in the earth was sending a signal. Sometimes, on quiet nights, it's hard to tell what's real and what isn't. I've noticed that on some nights, the air feels heavy, and even the local wildlife behaves oddly. Deer sometimes move in groups as if they're avoiding something, and birds seem to fall silent just as I'm watching the sky. One night, while on patrol near the Pohono Trail, I set up a small observation spot in an open area. I noticed what looked like a ripple in the air, a kind of distortion similar to a heat haze, but with colors I couldn't explain. I stood there for nearly an hour watching it fade away into nothing. It was a quiet, unnerving moment that left me wondering if there's more going on here than we can understand. Over the past year, I've also started hearing rumors of government and military cover-ups related to these events. I've picked up hints in offhand conversations with other rangers, and even seen redacted files that mention unexplained phenomena and anomalous activities at the park. I've seen codes that seem to refer to experimental research, and even the phrase interdimensional interface appeared in one of the files. I've been told not to ask too many questions, but it's hard to ignore the possibility that some of these incidents might not be entirely natural, or at least that someone higher up might know more than they're letting on. I remember one late autumn evening near Yosemite Falls when I was on patrol. The night was very quiet, almost too quiet, and I decided to camp in a small clearing nearby. I was drifting off to sleep when I started hearing soft sounds coming from the valley walls. At first, I thought it was just the wind or an echo of my own movements, but soon I realized that the sounds had a distinct pattern, almost like a broken melody. I tried to record the sounds, but every time I reached for my gear, they would stop. Later, I found out that other rangers had recorded similar patterns. It seems like there's something in the park that communicates in a way we don't fully understand. A couple of weeks ago, while I was near El Capitan Meadow, I witnessed something else I can't easily explain. I was documenting some unusual rock formations when I saw a shimmer in the air that looked like a heat haze, but with a cold, eerie quality to it. In that shimmer, I thought I saw a tall, thin figure with a faint glow. The figure seemed to look straight at me with eyes that were just dark voids, and then it disappeared quickly. I spent the rest of the day searching the area for any signs that I hadn't imagined it, but I found nothing. I'm still trying to figure out if what I saw was a trick of the light or something else entirely. There have also been reports from a few rangers about encounters with what they call black-eyed children. One ranger near the Big Oak Flat entrance told me about seeing two children with completely black eyes and unusually pale skin. They just stood there watching him from a distance. When he tried to approach, they seemed to vanish into the trees. At first, I dismissed it as a local myth or something made up, but now I've heard similar stories from others, each with the same unsettling details. Another account that has been mentioned a few times involves what one of the rangers described as crawler humanoids. A night shift near Tenaya Lake, a ranger reported seeing a creature with very long, spindly limbs moving in a jerky manner. Its skin looked unusually pale, and its eyes, if you could even call them that, emitted a faint, eerie light. The creature didn't leave any tracks behind, almost as if it was shifting in and out of our reality. I've been collecting these stories, and while I can't say for sure what they all mean, the similarities in the details are hard to ignore. The thing about these events is that they don't follow a neat, predictable pattern. It isn't a simple, I went camping, saw a monster, and ran away scenario. These incidents happen in layers and often overlap. Sometimes you just notice a change in the atmosphere, like a sudden drop in temperature, or an unusual silence among the birds and animals. Other times there are clear events, like the lights above Sentinel Dome, or the echoing sounds near Yosemite Falls. Each of these events leaves me with more questions than answers. I've kept a detailed log of what I've seen. I have maps with marked locations, sketches, and even some audio recordings that capture odd static or faint voices. I've thought about sharing some of this evidence with researchers who might be able to help explain these phenomena. But every time I've tried, I've met with resistance. There's a strong culture of "don't ask questions" around here. And the idea of stirring up controversy isn't something everyone is comfortable with. But as more of us experience these events, the pressure to understand what's really going on is growing. I'm writing this as a record of what I've experienced and as a call for others to look into these matters. There's so much about this world that we still don't understand. And Yosemite might be more than just a beautiful park. It might be a place where different forces or energies come together. I don't have all the answers by any means. I'm just a park ranger who has seen more than I ever expected to see. I feel responsible for documenting these events, and I hope that by sharing them on your YouTube channel, more people will come forward with similar stories, so that maybe we can piece together a bigger picture. I've attached a few files to this email. There are some low-resolution images of that light near Tunnel View from the night of August 17th last year, an audio clip from the event near Yosemite Falls, and scanned pages from my personal log about the footprints I saw near Mariposa Grove. I know none of these are ironclad proof, but they're real attempts to document what I've experienced. Sometimes I wonder if these strange events have something to do with changes in the natural environment. I remember an intense day in early March, when reports of northern lights reached far beyond their usual areas. That day, the atmosphere here felt charged. Later that evening, I saw a cascade of lights over Half Dome that didn't look like any normal aurora. I can't help but think there might be a link between these cosmic events and what we're seeing here on the ground. There was another time when I encountered something I can only call a shapeshifter. I was out near Mariposa Grove on a patrol in a really remote part of the park. I came across a series of footprints that didn't look human, long, oddly shaped prints that led into a dense part of the woods. As I followed them, the forest suddenly felt much quieter, and I started to sense that I wasn't alone. I even thought I saw a figure that seemed to change shape in the dim light, from something that looked almost human to something more undefined and unsettling. I couldn't get any closer, and by the time I gathered my nerve to report it, the prints were all I had to show for the encounter. I did report them to my superior, but all I got in response was a suggestion to focus on the routine work and not get sidetracked by things that might be imagined. I've tried to stay as objective as possible, even though there are days when it's hard to tell if what I've seen is real or just my imagination running wild after a long shift. I've gathered a lot of information over these months, records, sketches, and recordings. I've thought about passing this evidence on to some experts, but the red tape and the fear of being labeled a crackpot keep holding me back. It seems there's an unspoken rule here that some things are better left unspoken, but as more and more of us experience these events, it feels wrong to keep quiet. I'm aware that all this might sound like a collection of strange stories, but every single thing I've described is something I experienced or heard about directly from someone else who works here. I sometimes question my own judgment when I'm out alone at night, but the consistency of what others report has convinced me that something unusual is happening in Yosemite. I feel it's my duty to document these occurrences, not only for my own peace of mind, but so that others who might have seen similar things know they're not alone. I'm not asking for anyone to jump to conclusions or believe every word immediately. I just want to share what I've seen and heard over the past year. The park has always been a place of wonder and beauty, but lately it also feels like there's something more beneath the surface, a hidden side of Yosemite that few people know about. I'm not an expert on these kinds of phenomena. I'm just a guy who works here and has witnessed enough strange events to feel compelled to speak up. Donovan, I hope you'll take this information seriously and consider discussing it on your channel. If even a few more people come forward with similar accounts, maybe we can start piecing together what's really happening. I'm more than willing to share additional details or meet with anyone who wants to look into these matters further. But for now, I need to remain anonymous to protect my job and my safety. Thank you for taking the time to read my account. I know it's a lot to take in, but I truly believe that these events are real and deserve more attention than they've gotten so far. If you need more details, additional files, or if there's anything else I can do to help with the investigation, just let me know. Stay safe and keep asking questions. I hope we can find some answers together. My name's Roger, and I've been living in Fayette County, Pennsylvania, specifically the Uniontown area, my entire life. I'm not what you'd call a believer in every oddball story out there, but my friend Becca, who works at a local shop and save, shared something with me that I can't get out of my head. It involves a tall, lanky figure she saw outside the big glass windows of the store last month. She's never been one to exaggerate, let alone make up tall tales for attention, so this has had me stuck in a loop wondering what on earth she actually saw. Let me give you a bit of background. Shop and Save is one of those old-school grocery spots that's managed to hold on despite the Walmart in South Union Township creeping up, and the big giant eagle up in South Park, trying to draw folks away. I usually pop in there a couple times a week for those random items I always forget during my main grocery run, like half and half for my coffee or an extra bag of chips if I'm planning to watch the Steeler game with friends. It's relatively small, with these big fluorescent lights that make everything look a bit washed out. Most days it's quiet, except for the occasional local who likes to chat up the cashier for 10 minutes about local news, or the high school football team's latest performance. You get the picture. It's not exactly a hub of supernatural happenings. Anyway, Becca works there part-time in the evenings. She's a pretty chill person, maybe 5'2", quiet, but super kind to anyone who comes in. I've known her since high school. She told me what she experienced one night about 3 weeks ago, sometime close to the start of the holiday rush in mid-December. She's the one who usually closes up if her shift runs late, and this one particular evening was no exception. She clocked out around 9:30 p.m., later than usual because she had to cover for someone who called off sick. The store was still open until 10 p.m., but she'd done her part and was heading out from the register to the staff room in the back to gather her belongings. But here's the weird bit. As she came back out front to leave, she looked through the big glass front windows that face the parking lot and the main road. Usually, you'll see cars pulling in, maybe one or two at that time of night, or someone wandering in to grab some last-minute milk. Instead, she spotted this extremely tall figure. She said it had to be at least 7 feet, maybe more, pacing back and forth near the curb just outside. She told me it was so tall its head looked disproportionately far from its shoulders, and it had these long arms that swung in this unnatural way. She described its movements like a puppet on strings, sort of jerky, almost too fluid for a normal person. It makes me cringe just picturing it. While she's telling me this story, I remember I kept asking, "Are you absolutely sure it wasn't someone in a hoodie or something?" And she just shook her head, said there was no way it was a normal person. She kept stressing how it was that unnatural gait that freaked her out. It moved as if the knees bent backward or something. She also said it was wearing something dark, but it was the shape of this thing more than the clothing that made her blood run cold. Now typically, our region's known for weird sightings. Over the years, there have been rumors of big cats wandering around the outskirts of Uniontown, and folks talk about the legendary Chestnut Ridge sightings of strange lights, or even Bigfoot. I've heard those stories all my life, but a super tall humanoid figure with elongated limbs, that's not in the usual local lore, not like the UFO talk over near Kecksburg, or the big hairy creatures rumored in the woods. The store lights are bright enough that from inside you can see fairly clearly into the parking lot if it's not raining or foggy. On that particular night, apparently, it was clear. Not many cars, so the lamppost was still on. She described the figure to me in such detail, I swear I got chills. The arms, she said, were almost as long as its legs when it walked, like they swung close to the knees. And it wasn't hunched over the way a tall person might stoop. Instead, it stood with a kind of twisted posture, but it was definitely upright. Becca said she froze for a minute, half thinking someone was pranking her. But who would do that? We don't exactly have the budget or the sense of humor for elaborate pranks around here, especially on a random Tuesday night. Becca admitted she panicked, She dropped her bag and had to scramble to pick it up, scurrying back behind the register. She was so unsettled she actually called the night manager, Dan, from her cell, indirectly telling him there was someone creepy outside pacing around. Dan apparently poked his head around the corner from the dairy aisle, but by the time he got to the front windows, the figure was gone. If it was a normal person, you might figure they walked off, but she said it vanished almost too quickly. Like in a matter of seconds, it wasn't even in the parking lot anymore. The next day, she called me. I think she just needed to talk to someone who wouldn't laugh in her face. We actually ended up meeting at a Starbucks near Morgantown. She was heading down there for some reason. I think she had an errand at the Morgantown Mall. Over coffee, she confided all the details. I could tell she was shaken up. She even told me she'd had nightmares for a couple nights afterward. Dreams about a tall shadow standing by the store window. I tried to reassure her, telling her maybe it was just an extremely tall, lanky guy passing by. But the more we chatted, the more I realized how deeply this unnerved her. She talked about the face, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. She said she couldn't discern any real facial features. It was like the face was there, but in the shadows, almost blurred out, even though the light should have revealed something. Now, I'm not trying to connect dots that don't exist, but about a week after that, my uncle, who works at a bakery in the next town over, Brownsville, mentioned offhand that a few folks there have complained about seeing some strange figure or weird prowler in the area. He chalked it up to random rumors. Brownsville has a lot of old houses and sometimes squatters, or just the usual petty crime that pops up in small towns, but it still caught my attention. I found myself looking into any local news stories that might match this weird description, but I didn't find anything concrete except for talk on random Facebook groups about scary things near the Monongahela River. Nothing matched the tall, elongated limb entity specifically. There was one post, though, in a cryptid group for southwestern Pennsylvania, referencing a sighting of a strange pale crawler near the ferry landing. The timing wasn't exactly the same. It was around the same week, but the mention of pale, tall, elongated was enough to make my hair stand on end. Honestly, I was always a huge X-Files fan growing up, so part of me is intrigued, but the other part of me feels alarmed because I trust Becca's word. She's no dramatist. I'll be honest, Donovan, I started going down a rabbit hole. If you check out the local legends around Chestnut Ridge, which extends through parts of Westmoreland, Fayette, and Indiana counties, you'll find everything from Bigfoot sightings to UFO activity. Stan Gordon, a local researcher, has documented odd encounters around here, but not many talk about a super tall, thin being with an unnatural gait. One or two might mention something vaguely similar, but it's typically overshadowed by big hairy creatures, or the occasional talk of large winged humanoids, like some folks claiming Mothman sightings near highways. So that's why this stands out. Because I'm a curious person, I asked Becca if there was any chance it could have been some kind of trick of the light, or maybe a reflection. She dismissed that fast. She said she's used to the store lights and how they play on the glass after dark. This was definitely outside, physically pacing near the window. She emphasized how it walked back and forth like it was either nervous or maybe searching for something. But each stride was so exaggerated and slow. She never felt threatened directly, but said it was more this sense of dread, like you're encountering something you're not supposed to see. I also asked if she had any weird electrical problems at the store at the same time, like lights flickering or the register glitching, because you hear about that in some UFO or paranormal cases. But she said no, everything was normal. Dan, the night manager, apparently joked about it when she told him a day later. He teased her a bit, something along the lines of, might have been some West Virginia basketball player lost in the parking lot. She didn't appreciate the joke. She told him bluntly that this was no normal person. She's still rattled. She's taken to leaving the store at night in a group if she can. If she's alone, she'll have her phone out. I think part of the reason Becca confided in me is because I've always had an interest in the unknown. A few years back, I even traveled to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to check out the Mothman Museum just out of sheer curiosity. I've always kept an eye out for local sightings, Like the 1965 Kecksburg UFO incident that everyone around here references. I don't necessarily go full conspiracy theorist, but I definitely keep an open mind. And hearing this from someone as grounded as Becca has me spooked, to be honest. I also want to mention, though it might be unrelated, that a few nights later, I was driving home around 11 p.m. from a friend's house in Hopwood. My route took me past the Shop and Save. I slowed down near the entrance. Curiosity got the best of me, and I looked around the lot for anything unusual. The place was nearly deserted except for a red pickup truck parked near the entrance. Nothing strange at first glance, but as I turned onto the main road, I had that unsettling feeling you get when you sense you're being watched. I scanned my mirrors, saw nothing, but it was one of those intangible feelings. Could have been my imagination running wild after hearing her story, but it was strong enough for me to break into a sweat. I ended up locking my car doors just out of habit.